Social media platforms have become powerful centers for expression and communication. It gives everyone a voice and freedom of speech access. However, several government bans and internet blackouts on the African continent, said to preserve social order, have created challenges opponents view as an attempt to control and silence opposition. Hello and welcome to Our Voices. I'm Ginny Niwa and I'm joined by my co-host Oriane Intagishika and Siminishi Ekoye. On this week's episode, we will take a closer look at government censorship and their potential impact on democracy, especially through social media. Hello, ladies.
Hello. Hello.
So let's talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly of social media.
That's right.
So here in the United States, right, social media platform, they're private companies. So you are not bound by the First Amendment of, the free speech. And the free speech is guaranteed along with all other constitutional rights. In fact, they have their own First Amendment,
That's right.
Which means particularly these social networking sites, such as Facebook, X, formerly known as Twitter, and others, can limit, control, and censor speech as much as more than the governmental entities. Basically, they can moderate the content people post on their website without violating those users' freedom, and those. You can see how many can see free speech as a double edges. It's a great tool to express and inform oneself, but it also may be harmful to others. So what are your thoughts?
Yeah, definitely. I do agree. It's a very packed and complicated situation because it's just, it's a community online. But, to be honest with you, I feel like we can live without social media if it got banned today, 100%. Right? I think that it should be regulated. I think that it should be regulated because, especially on the continent, it's constantly being regulated because of cultural context. We know when we look at what's being said in terms of freedom of speech on the continent, that doesn't sort of exist in many places where you can say certain things to the president, to the king, to certain institutions because respect for those institutions. What we see freedom of speech in the West is completely different. Now, I also see that it needs to be regulated because the platforms themselves can be biased because of that very reason of not being regulated. The platforms can be biased in that they take down and they allow on the platform what they allow. And maybe Lily will tell us, Siminish will tell us in a minute, some of the cases in Ethiopia where they didn't take down what they were supposed to take down. And so they should be regulated. You take the case of Nigeria. Nigeria in 2021, the president tweeted what many people thought that was a very simple sentence. And I think I pulled it up earlier. It says, many of those misbehaving today are too young to be aware of the destruction and loss of lives that occurred during the Nigerian Civil War. Those of us in the field for 30 months who went to the war will treat them in the language they understand. This was talking about the war in Nigeria, the Civil War. And many thought that that was a very simple sentence that shouldn't have been taken down, but it was taken down and the government thought that's double standards. Now, I do believe that it shouldn't be taken down 100% because social activists who are positively acting with this, social activism, doing social activism, should be allowed because that's the only place they have, if they don't have on the ground access to different communities. Take the example of Uganda. For the most part, Bobby Wine's activism happens online. It doesn't translate politically, but it happens online, and that's the only place he seems to thrive. So he shouldn't be shut down because that's the only place, he can actually express himself as a politician.
Yeah. I mean, the issue is these big tech companies who control these platforms. They are profit-oriented companies, and they regulate themselves. So it's up to them to decide what to take down or not. And when it comes to governments, it's not necessarily about respect. You are right. That also could be the case. But at the same time, also, it's about controlling power and controlling information flow. So the reason why they shut down or they don't shut down, it goes with their with what they have to do. But in my opinion, social media is the one that's a double-edged sword. On one hand, it helps exercise free speech, yes, but on the other hand, it has become a platform for misinformation, for hate speech, for cyberbullying, and for a place to incite violence. And as you said, what happened in Rohingya community in Myanmar or in Ethiopia, you can see the damage it's causing on the ground. even at individual level, the addiction, the loss of focus, self-perception, and all these are need to be regulated and need to be called accountable before further damage is caused.
Well, I agree.
Well, that's true, but Nigerian authorities are seeking to pass a law that would give the government power to regulate digital platforms across the country. Supporters say social media has been used to spread falsehood that endangers lives and property, but the opponents say it's an attempt to stifle free speech and dissident opinion. Timothy Obwezu has the story from the capital of Abuja.
For the past 6 years, Chude Nnamdi has made a name for himself on social media by commenting on national issues such as police brutality. Nnamdi has more than 260,000 followers on X, formerly known as Twitter.
I participated, we planned, we did a whole lot of things, and after that, I got my connection enlarged. I got a whole lot of other, I got to know a whole lot of other social media activists.
But as his fame on social media grew, so did the challenges. In March, Nnamdi was arrested by Nigeria's Department of State Services, or DSS, for his post about an influential businessman. Authorities accused Nnamdi of cyberbullying, defamation, and criminal intimidation. He had been held without charge for a week until activists protested and he was freed pending trial. Nnamdi says these days he feels in danger wherever he goes.
Aside my arrest by the police and the DSS, I've had so many challenges, threats to me, to my family. I don't just go to places because I know that people, I have so many enemies. When I mean serious enemies, there are people that will see me here today, they would like to kill me.
Nigerians are heavy users of social media, and they often take to digital platforms to criticize government policies and demand better governance. But Nigerian authorities argue that unregulated social media use has too often resulted in problems, including threats to security. This month, authorities introduced a bill that will give the National Broadcasting Commission rights to control social media platforms. Activists say it is an attempt to stifle free speech. Kolawole Oluwadare is a deputy director at Nigeria's Socio-Economic Rights Accountability Project, or SERAP.
That is basically the reason, the underpinning of the various steps that are taken by various administrations, including the ones preceding this one, to regulate social media. And the fears and the concerns are public, that although the law may look well-meaning, the law may even be justified, but the use of those laws has been found with other legislations, including the Cybercrime Act, shows the propensity of the Nigerian authorities to use law, called well-meaning laws, as it were, to clamp down on human rights.
SERAP has petitioned the Nigerian government to drop the bill. In 2019, Nigeria shelved a bill to regulate social media after it led to street protests. But some citizens, like Abuja resident Gift Mweze, say the government may have a point.
Nigerians they don't really know how to process information. So when they get these details, they go about social media saying and exaggerating the situation, thinking that maybe other countries have different story about the same situation. So if we are able to regulate what goes into the social media about this country, it's going to go a long way.
The bill has been read in Parliament but will need a public hearing and the President's approval before it becomes law. Timothy Obiezu, VOA News, Abuja, Nigeria.
Thanks, Timothy, for that report. Now we have with us our guest, Ms. Rinu Oduwala, the Executive Project Director of Connect Hub Nigeria, a platform that documents, defends, and advocates against state violence and police brutality in Nigeria. An advocate for human rights, a leader in her community, Ms. Oduala was on the forefront of the hashtag #EndSARS movement, social media campaign on Twitter that went viral, documenting abuses of the Special Anti-Robbery Squad, or SARS, in 2020. She joined us via Skype from Boston, Massachusetts. So, hi. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. Hello.
Hello. So in October 2020, right, the hashtag #EndSARS took the world by storm. It was a call to end police brutality. It also spurred that was spurred by Nigeria's Special Anti-Robbery Squad. And the large movement drew support of many world leaders and international human rights organizations. Where are we on the issue today? And were there any retaliations?
Thank you very much for the question. I think that last month was the third memorial of the #EndSARS movement, of the #EndSARS protest in Nigeria, which were brutally ended after the Nigerian military and police officers shot at peaceful protesters during the protest. And 3 years later, the question we're asking is, did SARS really end? Did police brutality really end? A lot of protesters that are still in prison, by the way, for just simply protesting. About 2 months ago, there were news that the Lagos state government, a state in Nigeria, has kept over 100 dead bodies of protesters, or bodies, as they say, from the #EndSARS protest since 2020, and are now looking to bury those people in a mass burial. And the question we're asking is that there's been a lot of denials, several denials about the fact that people did not die during the protest, or people weren't shot. Then where did the dead bodies come from? Has there been any justice for people who were killed by the state during the protest? Have the people who were arrested during the protest, have they been released? And another important question is that the police brutality, the menace for police brutality in Nigeria really reduced, or has it even abated a bit? Also recently, as there's been a news about the Nigerian police trying to revive the SARS unit, which they disbanded in 2020, purportedly disbanded in 2020 under another name called SIF. So if you ask me where are we at right now, I would say we are back where we started from. Police brutality hasn't ended, protesters are in prison, and they're looking to bring SARS back. Thank you.
Ms. Renu, now looking at the grand scheme of things, I mean, we have different countries, social media plays different roles, whether it be to help or to hurt. When you look at the grand scheme of things, what should be the role of the government? In the beginning of the show, I said that we can live with our social media, even if a government were to ban it. What should be the role of the government?
I disagree that we can live without social media. I think that there are several perspectives to this social media regulation conversation that are a bit short-sighted. Social media today has become more than just sharing information with our friends. That's become part of democratic spaces. And today, across the world, we can see that democracy is under threat, like a lot of institutions said. And the vulnerabilities of democracy are being exploited by state government and national government all over the world. All around the world, in countries like Nigeria, like Kenya, Uganda, an example was made in Zimbabwe, France, and a lot of other spaces. They are now increasing laws to limit democratic spaces. And then when we talk about regulation, who exactly is regulating these spaces? I don't think that is the same government who is seeking to further limit these spaces that are now looking to say they want to do a regulation.
Ms.
For me, I feel
let me raise a question maybe here so that you can answer it all together. I agree that social media is a platform for activism like police brutality, like what you do. And government regulation to shut down these social media platforms is mostly to silence dissent. But at the same time, there is cyberbullying, there is hate crime, there is misinformation, disinformation, which are all hateful crimes that are flourishing on these platforms and are causing harm to communities, are causing even conflicts. So how do you say this social media needs to be regulated? I don't believe also myself to shutting down is not an option. Yes, but how should they be regulated?
Thank you very much. I think that one of the co-hosts earlier when the show started talked about how it's a double-edged sword. Fact that there are a lot of vulnerabilities that have been exploited by bad actors today doesn't literally translate to, yes, let us now begin to look at how we can shut down these spaces. For me, I do not believe that the same people who are exploiting the vulnerabilities, just like I talked earlier, are in the right position to actually do a sort of regulation per se. For the government who are looking to further shut down civic spaces, they are not in a space to talk about regulation. I like to say that today around the world, if you look at the governments are the biggest spreader of fake news, they are the biggest spreader of misinformation, they're the biggest spreader of state-sponsored disinformation. So they shouldn't be the ones who are trying to regulate it. If we're talking about regulation, then we should be talking to tech, to the big tech companies, to the owners of social media companies themselves, to the teams in charge of these spaces, in order to look for a way on how to create safe spaces for citizens around the world to effectively share information, to organize, to mobilize, and to hold their government accountable. But I do not believe that government should be in charge of regulation.
Thank you so much, Ms. Rinu Odwala. Thank you so much for sharing your experience and your thoughts on how good and bad social media has been and how it should be regulated. Thank you so much. So now it's time for a quick break, and when we return, we'll continue our conversation on the latest findings on what people think about recent efforts to block social media on the continent with Afrobarometer, a Pan-African non-partisan survey research network that conducts public attitude surveys. But before that, we ask you to share your thoughts on the topic as well as tips on our social media platforms at VOA Africa. We are on Facebook, Instagram, and X, formerly known as Twitter, at VOA Africa. And don't forget to use the hashtag VOA Our Voices. Stay with us and we'll be right back.
In times of change, when the world seems uncertain and what we hear doesn't reflect what we see, we seek the truth. When we are told only part of the story, we lose trust. In moments of crisis, our dreams, hopes, and wishes for a better tomorrow depends on a free press. At Voice of America, we bring you the stories that people take risks to see. We connect the world and unite it with truth. At Voice of America, we show you the whole picture.
Welcome back. You are tuned into Our Voices. We are discussing social media government censorship, and joining us on Skype from Accra, Ghana is Mame Akua Amoha Twum, Communication Coordinator for Anglophone West and North Africa at Afrobarometer. Thank you for joining us.
Well, I'm very happy to be here, Ginny. Thank you for reaching out.
Such a pleasure. So you're a nonprofit organization that conducts public attitude surveys on democracy, governance, the economy, and society. Therefore, you can get a clear data of where citizens stand on these important issues. According to your research, when African governments regulate social media, is it to protect the society from negative effects of social media, or is it to prevent free speech?
Well, that's a very interesting question. But let me just take a step back, you rightly introduced Afrobarometer. We are a research network, and we've been taking the pulse of Africans on issues that affect them, like democracy and corruption, and including topics like media, which we are discussing now. Right. So from our round 8 survey that we did in the year across 2019 to 2021, our data showed us that, yes, so radio and television continue to remain the main source of information that Africans, get their news from. But the data also showed that steadily citizens of Africa are turning to social media and the internet to get their news, right? So we also asked our citizens, first of all, who do they think they spread false news? And it fell back on social media users. So I just wanted to put that in context. But even with that, in terms of the effects of social media usage, we found a large majority of our citizens saying that it helps people to have more impact on the political processes. And you can understand why from what Bruno was saying and from what you said, people are informed. So informed citizens are able to contribute to the public discourse, right? Another good effect, as respondents cited, was that social media makes them also informed about current events, which is also very important, right? So we're talking about access to information, and we are talking about empowerment and activism, right? But on the other hand, we find that our respondents are saying that social media makes people more likely to believe false news. And that's a whopping 75% of citizens who are saying that. Okay. And another worrying reason they gave is that social media makes people less tolerant of people who have different views. So like your co-host said from the beginning, it's a double-edged sword. It's good, but then it's bad.
Mm-hmm. Right. Now, before we continue, let's just quickly go on the ground and let's go to Kampala, Uganda, to hear what some of the people had to say about their government's effort to shut down social media and its impact on their communities in our Your Voice segment. We have Sarah Birete, constitutional government activist, Blessing Kahumuza, an online sub-editor and communication practitioner, and Catherine Tusime. Let's take a listen, and then we'll come back and we'll talk about exactly what you just said about how informed people can make informed decisions, but I have a point about that.
African governments usually shut down social media platforms during elections. They argue that they want to protect national security because of misinformation that usually comes through social media and can incite violence.
I think it's to maintain a certain level of control over who has access to information, who can comment on what issues, and to make sure that they can control the narrative.
I think governments normally shut down the social media platforms because they are trying to limit access to information that is normally critical of them. And this is a human rights violation.
So the reasons have no justification. It's just the culture of governments, especially authoritarian regimes, that don't care about the freedoms of the people.
The best way to combat misinformation and hate speech is by holding users accountable to the things that they publish or post on their platforms. Facebook has done this by blocking or warning someone, whoever posts anything to do with hate speech or racism.
Sensitization on use of social media, because you have now the citizens journalism rising because everybody has a platform, but with no training.
First of all, fact checkers, but that's a bit strenuous because as much as computers can do that, you also need human input and things like that. But fact checkers are one of them. Verifying information that comes into, even if it's from an official source, just having them verify the information and putting disclaimers at the bottom. Elon Musk does that very well on Twitter. He has little captions at the bottom when information is out, like, oh, this is not true, or oh, this is true, and things like that really help people.
Well, we also have our own fact checks here at VOA as well. But back to you, Mami Aku. You talked about how informed people make informed decisions. We are talking about, here in Uganda, and maybe Lily, you can also add something on that. Where is the disconnect? Because we have places in Uganda where they are very heavy users of social media. I talked about that earlier. Now, where is the disconnect? Why aren't people going to the ballot to vote when they are very heavy users and activists on social media? I mean, I think that's what should translate into political activism and then political changes.
Yeah, maybe it has also got to do with media literacy on how people are consuming the information they see on social medias and how they translate it into their life. So maybe have you done any research about media literacy level and what should be done on that line?
Okay, great questions. I'd like to start about the voting. I think over the years, what we've seen is that citizens, yes, always say in our survey that they think elections are the best way to select leaders, right? But when you look at the voter turnout, then especially among the youth, it's not too high. And we've seen that it's because citizens are not enjoying the democratic dividends, right? They're seeing the elect leaders and then leaders come into power, but then they are not, meeting their needs or fulfilling the promises for which they voted for them. And so then we get agitated. And then, first of all, you can even get access to your MP to go talk to them, but then you have a platform like a social media or any digital platform where you can voice out your concern. You can voice out your frustrations. So that's why we're seeing that disconnect. We believe in elections to select our leaders, but when they are not performing and then we want to voice out, then we have these platforms to have that public discourse, right? But also in terms of media literacy, we've seen that progressively Africans are getting advanced with media. We're having, because there's also the propagation.
Unfortunately, our time is short. We know we can see everything on your platform, which is Afrobarometer. Unfortunately, that is our show for this week. I'd like to thank Miss Rinu Oduwala, human rights activist and Connect Hub Nigeria founder, and Miss Mami Akua Amoa Twum, Afrobarometer's communication coordinator for Anglophone West and North Africa. Be sure to go to our website at voaafrica.com and our YouTube channel, where you can catch up on the latest episode of Our Voices and the new world's top news stories. Now on our behalf, on everyone here at the Voice of America, I am Jeannie Niwa. Thanks for tuning in. Until next time, cheers.